You're watching the MMA Oracles Podcast, and now, presenting your host, Jack Moon.
This is the MMA Oracles Podcast, and I am your host, Jack Moon. This week, we are back at the Apex for a pretty terrible fight night card, so I'm just going to dive right into it. First fight of the night here is Charalampos, the ferocious Grigoriou, taking on Chad, the monster, and Helliger. In the red corner, we have Grigoriou, who is 31 years old. He is 8-3 overall with 6 knockouts and 2 submissions. He's making his UFC debut here after defeating Cameron Smotherman on the Contender Series to earn his UFC contract. He does have a great team behind him at Longo Weidman MMA. He is a solid striker. He throws a combination, and he's a pretty punishing striker. He's the former CFC champ as well, and he's looking to start his UFC career on the right foot, and he has shown some potential so far, so I am interested to see what he can do. He is taking on Ann Helliger, who is 37 years old. He is 12-7 overall, pretty terrible record, with 7 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 2 decisions. He is the former RFC bantamweight and flyweight champ. He holds notable wins over Brady Heastan and Muin Gafurov. But that Muin Gafurov win was on the Contender Series. It was a split decision, earned him his UFC contract, and he is 1-2 in the UFC since. He defeated Jesse Strader, who really should have never been in the UFC in the first place. And he's lost to Alatang Hali and Jose Johnson. Coming into this fight as a minus 205 favorite is Grigoriou, while Ann Helliger is sitting at a plus 170 underdog. It's currently 1,605 Tapology votes on this fight. 81% of those are favoring Grigoriou. 69% are taking him to win by knockout. Of the 19% taking Ann Helliger, 59% of those are taking him to win by decision. I've seen some people picking Ann Helliger here, but I really don't give him much of a chance. Grigoriou has a reach advantage. He throws a lot more volume. He's a much more aggressive striker. He's the better striker as well, more technical. And he has a really great team behind him that kind of specializes in grappling. So I don't think Ann Helliger is going to be able to wrestle him and kind of work his grappling either. I think Grigoriou will be able to shut that down. Ann Helliger is crafty. He has more experience against better competition for sure, and he's never been knocked out. Most of his losses are by submission, so Grigoriou is not really a submission threat. I do think Ann Helliger will probably have some moments, be able to get to the final bell, but I think overall Grigoriou has much more success on the feet, kind of beats him up, wins the majority of this fight, and comes out ahead on the scorecards. So for the official pick, give me Charalampos, the ferocious Grigoriou, by unanimous decision. Next up on the card, we have a women's strawweight pairing between Jacqueline Jack Amarim and Corey Poppins McKenna. Amarim is 28 years old. She is 7-1 overall with 2 knockouts and 5 submissions. She is the former LFA champ. She is an aggressive finisher, has stopped all of her wins. She is 1-1 in the UFC currently. She lost in her debut against Sam Hughes, but rebounded in her last outing with a TKO win over Montserrat Ruiz. She does have a great team behind her at American Top Team, and she does have some hype behind her as well going into this fight. She will be taking on McKenna, who is 24 years old. She is 8-2 overall with 2 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 4 decisions. She is currently 3-1 in the UFC. She earned a contract on the Contender Series with a win over Vanessa Demopoulos, and her wins in the UFC have come over Kay Hansen, Miranda Granger, and Cheyenne Vlismas. Amarim is currently sitting at a minus 115 favorite, while McKenna is coming back at a minus 105 near even underdog. There is currently 1,610 Tapology votes on the fight. 69% of those are favoring the slight underdog McKenna, with 89% of those taking her to win by decision. Of the 31% taking Amarim, 64% of those have her winning a decision. Fans seem to be expecting this one to go to decision. I am as well, and I do think that favors McKenna. Amarim has never won a decision. She's a finisher, doesn't really go to the final round a lot. McKenna has also never been finished, and arguably she should be 4-0 in the UFC, as her only loss was a close split decision to Elise Reed. I think we've seen some improvements out of McKenna since that loss. She finished Miranda Granger and scored a solid win over Vlismas, who I think Cheyenne Vlismas is a pretty solid fighter in her own right, so I think that was a good win for McKenna. I do see McKenna as a bit underrated. She's a little bit undersized for this division, but she also has a great team behind her at Team Alpha Male, and she is a really well-rounded fighter. I see Amrim as a little bit overrated. I think people hype her up and like her more for her looks than her fighting ability. She's dangerous as well, don't get me wrong, but I do like the underdog here. I think McKenna will be able to pressure, control enough of this fight to edge out the rounds, and start to take over the longer the fight goes, because Amrim's not used to going longer into the fight. So give me, for the official pick, Corey McKenna by unanimous decision. Up next on the card, we move to the featherweight division for a matchup between Josh Kuya Kulabau taking on Danny El Puma Silva. In the red corner, we have Kulabau, who is 29 years old. He is 11-2-1 currently, with 5 knockouts, 1 submission, and 5 decisions. He is the former Hex champ, the former DFC champ, the former SF MMA champ, and he is currently 3-2-1 in the UFC. He holds notable wins over Rodolfo Marquez, Shaylan Nurdan Bieki, Sungwoo Choi, Melsik Bagdasarian, and he has a draw with Charles Jourdain. In the blue corner, we have Silva, who is 27 years old. He is 8-1 overall with 5 knockouts and 3 decisions. This is his UFC debut, as he's coming off a contract-winning victory on the Contender Series with a decision win over Angel Pacheco. He really hasn't beaten any good competition, so this is going to be a big step up for him here in his debut. Kulabau is currently sitting at a minus 180 favorite, with Silva as a plus 150 underdog. There's currently 1,639 Tapology votes on the fight. 85% of those are favoring Kulabau to win, with 81% taking him by decision. Of the 15% taking Silva to win, 60% are taking him to win a decision as well. Silva couldn't finish Angel Pacheco on the Contender Series. That guy had a hell of a chin. Silva really just teed off on him, was really able to land at will. And he's really pretty much done the same to a lot of his opponents. He puts them away, or he just kind of throws volume at him and wins the rounds. But I don't see that being the case for him here. I think this is a big step up. Kulabau has been in there against some tough competition, and he's durable. He's only been knocked out once, and that was by Jalen Turner at lightweight. So, I mean, that's not a big surprise. Jalen Turner is a huge lightweight as it is. So, going against the featherweight here, I don't see Kulabau getting finished. I think once Silva realizes that he can't just tee off like he has on his previous opponents, use the game plan that he's used to doing, I think it's going to be a big adjustment for him. I think Kulabau is going to be able to counter him. I think Kulabau is going to be able to use his grappling. I think Kulabau is going to really just teach him a lesson in this fight, show his veteran savvy, and come out with a win here. I think he's going to edge out the rounds. I don't know if he'll be able to put Silva away. I think Silva is a game opponent, but I do see Kulabau leading this dance once Silva realizes that he's not going to be a pushover like the rest of his opponents. So for the official pick, give me Josh Kulabau by unanimous decision. Up next on the card, we move down to the flyweight division for a matchup between Jafel Pastor Filo taking on O'Day, the Jamaican sensation Osborne. In the red corner, Filo is 30 years old. He is 15-3 overall, with 5 knockouts, 9 submissions, and 1 decision. He is the former Shuto Brazil champ. He's currently 1-1 in UFC, but he holds notable wins in his career over Vinicius Salvador, Roybert Ichivara on the Contender Series, and Daniel Barez in his last UFC fight. And his only loss in the UFC has been to Muhammad Makayev, who is top ranked, and I'm pretty much in line for a title shot. Filo also has a great team behind him at Nova União. On the other side, Osborne is 32 years old. He is 12-6 overall with 4 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 3 decisions. He also earned a contract on the Contender Series with a submission win over Armando Villarreal. He is currently 4-4 in the UFC with wins over Jerome Rivera, CJ Vergara, Zaruk Adashev, Charles Johnson, and he's also got a decent team behind him at Syndicate MMA. Filo is currently the minus 175 favorite, with Ode Osborne coming back as the plus 145 underdog. It's currently 1,635 Tapology votes on this fight. 83% of those are favoring Filo, with 73% of those taking him to win by submission. Of the 17% taking Osborne, looks like 56% of those are taking him to win by decision. It's really a tricky fight because both fighters are pretty unreliable here. I am favoring Filo a bit, as he's at least more consistent in his approach and with his plan of attack. I think it fits well against Osborne's style as well. But like I said, both guys are pretty unreliable. 3 of Osborne's 6 losses have been by submission, so I think that does look good for Filo as well. But I do kind of agree with the Tapology consensus here. I think either Filo gets him down and submits him, or Osborne's kind of awkward style and a little bit more well-rounded game allows him to kind of squeak out a close, maybe even split decision win. Osborne's lanky. He's definitely a tricky fighter to figure out at times. But I think if Filo just pressures him, Filo is an aggressive fighter. He's finished all but one of his wins, so I think if he pressures him, I think he can overwhelm him with his grappling attack, force the grappling exchanges, and lock something up to get it done. So for the official pick, give me Jafel Filo by submission in the first round. Next up on the card, we head to the awful women's bantamweight division that almost really shouldn't even exist anymore for a matchup between Josie Nunes as she's taking on Chelsea Chandler. Nunes is 30 years old. She is 10-1 overall with 7 knockouts and 3 decisions. She is a striker. She is currently 3-0 in the UFC with wins over B. Malecki, Ramona Pasquale, and Zara Farron. B. Malecki had some potential, but she barely ever fights. I think she's like 3-1, and the other 2 are just awful. Chandler is 33 years old. She's 5-2 overall. Woo! With 2 knockouts, 1 submission, and 2 decisions. She's currently 1-1 in the UFC. She does train with Cesar Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and her win in the UFC was over Julija Stoliarenko, who has been awful in the UFC, and her loss was to Norma Dumont. Going into this fight, Nunes is a minus 150 favorite. Chandler is a plus 125 underdog. It's currently 1,608 Tapology votes on the fight. 86% of those favor Nunes, with 68% taking her to win by decision. Of the 14% taking Chandler, 71% are taking her to win by decision. It's a really shitty division, pretty shitty fight, and a pretty obvious pick. If you haven't realized, Nunes is that pick. Both are cutting to bantamweight, but both women have been previously fighting at featherweight. Nunes is smaller, though. I think that cut at least should be easier for her. She really hasn't been tested against a decent grappler, so it worries me a little bit. I think if Chandler gets her down, anything goes. I'm definitely not going to be betting on this fight because both fighters are unreliable, and this is an awful division, so I just don't think the skill level is high enough for me to risk any money on. I think kind of either one could collapse at any point. But I will stick with the favorite. For the official pick, give me Josiane Nunes to win a unanimous decision. Next up on the card, we have an interesting lightweight pairing between Nathan Lethal Levy taking on Mike Beast Boy Davis. Levy is 32 years old. He is 8-1 overall with 3 submissions and 5 decisions. He earned a contract on the Contender Series with a 3rd-round submission win and now he is currently 2-1 in the UFC since. He lost to Rafa Garcia in his UFC debut, but has since rebounded with wins over Mike Breeden and Genaro Valdez. He's got a karate-style striking. He gets in and out. He throws some flashy kicks and punches, so he can be pretty exciting to watch on the feet. He's pretty good defensively on the feet as well because of that. He's got pretty good grappling as well. All of his finishes are by submission, and he's got a good team behind him as well at Syndicate MMA. He will be taking on Davis, who is 31 years old. He is 10-2 overall with 7 knockouts, 1 submission, and 2 decisions. He is the former IF lightweight champion. He lost on his chance on the Contender Series against Sadiq Yusuf, but he won some fights, got into the UFC, where he is currently 3-1. He lost to Gilbert Burns in his UFC debut, but has since taken wins over Thomas Gifford, Mason Jones, and Vyacheslav Borshev. He is a powerful athlete, explosive guy. He's got good boxing and a great team behind him at Fusion XL Performance. Davis is currently the minus 250 favorite, with Levy coming back as a plus 205 underdog. There's currently 1,649 Tapology votes on this fight, with 84% taking Davis to win. Of those 84%, 71% are taking him to win by decision. Of the 16% taking Levy to win, 69% of those are taking him to win by decision. Honestly, a knockout win for Davis wouldn't shock me here. I do think he's the much more powerful and explosive fighter. He's got good boxing. I think if he can start landing on Levy, he can put him away, but Levy has that good defense with his karate style, like I mentioned, so I think he'll be hard to track down, hard to get a hold of. But Levy really just hasn't shown me that he can beat this level of competition yet. All of his wins are over the low-end guys. The opponent he beat on the Contender Series is 1-2 since. He beat Mike Breeden, who's 11-6 overall and 1-3 in the UFC, and that one win was kind of a fluke third-round knockout against a young prospect who had been crushing everyone, facing a lot of low-end competition as well. And then he beat Genaro Valdez, who is 0-3 in the UFC. Davis has beaten Mason Jones and Vyacheslav Borshev. Those guys' UFC records might not be great, but I definitely think they're better than anyone Levy has ever faced. And he's been in there against Sadiq Yusuf as well. So experience edge, I think, goes to Davis. I also think Davis is the better striker. He's got solid boxing, like I mentioned. He does have a slight reach advantage. He's definitely the more powerful fighter, explosive athlete. He's got solid takedown defense too, so I don't think Levy's going to be able to kind of get him down and work his grappling either. I do think that would be Levy's best chances would be to get him on the floor, or use his footwork on the feet to stay on the outside and out of danger and just kind of frustrate Davis. But I don't see him being able to really do either of those for a meaningful enough time to get him a win here. I think Davis, his power and explosiveness, his boxing will allow him to get inside and land some shots on Levy, land the more significant shots, the more telling, damaging shots as well. His power again and his takedown defense will allow him to stay out of danger on the floor. He may even be able to land a takedown of his own. Levy's he's a good fighter, so I'm not knocking him at all. So I think he'll be able to make it to the final round, but I think mostly it's going to be one-way traffic. So give me Mike Davis to win by unanimous decision as the official pick. Headlining the preliminary card for this UFC Fight Night will be another lightweight pairing here, as Thiago Moises takes on Mitch the Fight Stalker Ramirez. Moises is 28 years old. He is 17-7 overall with 3 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 6 decisions. He is currently 6-5 in the UFC, but he holds notable wins over Jamal Emirates in RFA. He beat Kurt Hollabaugh, Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, Alexander Hernandez, Christos Giagos, and Melky Costa. He is a super high-level grappler. He's a black belt, and he's got one of the best teams in the world behind him at American Top Team. On the other side, Ramirez is 31 years old. He is 8-1 overall with 5 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 1 decision. He is stepping in here on short notice to replace Brad Riddell, and props to him for stepping up. This is a guy who kind of got snubbed on The Ultimate Fighter He was removed, they said, because of Conor McGregor. I don't know if that's ever been confirmed, but he took a shot on the Contender Series as well. Kind of got his ass beat by Carlos Prates. Kind of got styled on by Carlos Prates, knocked out. He has since went out, won another fight, and is getting an opportunity here. So props for him to consistently get back in there and look to make his way to the UFC. But not a great matchup for him here. It's going to be a massive step up. Moises is currently a minus 400 favorite, with Ramirez sitting as a plus 350 underdog. It's currently 1,568 Tapology votes on the fight. 92% of those are favoring Moises. Of those 92%, 73% are taking him to win by submission. Of the 8% taking Ramirez, 61% are taking him to win by knockout. I think really that's Ramirez's only chance. I think he's got a puncher's chance in this fight. He is a decent striker, but Moises has fought good strikers before. Nothing he really hasn't seen here. He's fought in Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, Alexander Hernandez has some big power in his hands. So, Ramirez striking isn't anything super high level either. We saw him get dismantled on the feet by Carlos Prates. So I think this is an easy pick here for Moises. I think if it hits the floor, Ramirez is done. So I think he really should come out and just swing for the fences. Look to do anything he can to finish this fight. Take a chance, take a risk. But I think even that style opens him up for a takedown as well. So I do see Moises getting this to the floor and locking something up to end it. For the official pick, give me Thiago Moises by submission in the first round. The fight kicking off the main card will be a featherweight pairing between Christian C-Rod Rodriguez taking on Isaac the Midwest Chapa Dalgarian. Rodriguez is 26 years old. He is 10-1 overall with 3 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 3 decisions. He's currently 3-1 in the UFC. He beat Reyes Cortez on the Contender Series, but he missed weight, so he didn't get a contract. He has missed weight in 2 of his 4 UFC fights as well, which is why he's being forced to move up here from bantamweight. He does hold wins over Charalampos Grigoriou, who's also on this card. He beat him in CFFC. He was the first person to defeat Raul Rosas Jr. He also defeated Cameron Simon in his last outing, was the first one to defeat him as well. And he's got a good team behind him at Rufus Sport. On the other side, Dalgarian is 27. He is 6-0 overall, undefeated with 4 knockouts and 2 submissions. He is the former FAC champ. He has wins over TJ Britton, which won him that FAC belt and got him his UFC contract. He's 1-0 in the UFC since. He defeated Francis Marshall in his UFC debut, finished him in the first round. In fact, he has finished all of his fights in the first round, amateur or pro. So guy starts quick, and he is super dangerous. Dalgarian is a minus 135 favorite going into this fight, with Rodriguez coming back as a plus 110 underdog. It's currently 1,676 Tapology votes on the fight. 65% are taking the underdog Rodriguez, with 82% of those expecting him to win a decision. Of the 35% taking Dalgarian, 45% of those are taking him to win by decision. I think the longer this fight goes, the more we have to assume it's going to favor Rodriguez. So Dalgarian, like I mentioned, has never been outside of the first round as an amateur or a pro. So I think those 45% of those taking Dalgarian by decision are pretty crazy. I mean, guy doesn't get out of the first round, so why are we picking him to win a decision over a guy who's proven he can go to decision and defeat undefeated prospects? I mean, how many times are we going to do this with Rodriguez here? Rodriguez has already spoiled the rise of 2 other hyped undefeated prospects. He beat Raul Rosas Jr. and Cameron Simon. He did miss weight and beat those guys, but I see him set to do it again here and spoil another undefeated prospect. I'm really loving Rodriguez as an underdog here. I think he could be a great bet. Even with this change in weight class, he wasn't making bantamweight anyway, so I mean, he was basically fighting at a featherweight weight anyway. I think, if anything, it's probably going to benefit him to not try and cut as much weight. Obviously, Rodriguez needs to be cautious early in this fight. Bulgarian's going to come out quick. He's dangerous. He's got heavy hands. He's got some decent submissions as well. But I do think Rodriguez will be able to survive and really take over in the second and third rounds. Yeah, I love the underdog pick here. For the official pick, give me Christian Rodriguez by unanimous decision. Up next on the main card, we have a middleweight pairing between two journeymen that I wouldn't mind seeing both retire afterwards. As Gerald GM3 Mearshart is taking on Brian Bam Bam Barberena. Mearshart is 36 years old. He is 35-17 overall with 6 knockouts, 27 submissions, and 2 decisions. He's currently 10-9 in the UFC. He has notable wins over Sam Alvey, Eric Spicely, Trevin Giles, Duran Wynn, Mahmoud Muradov, Bruno Silva. He is a dangerous submission specialist, obviously, 27 submission wins. He does have some surprising pop in his hands. You can't take his striking lightly. But overall, his striking technique isn't that great. But he has started training with Killcliff FC. I think that is a good late career move for him. It's a great camp. On the other side, Barberena is 34. He is 18-11 overall with 11 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 5 decisions. He is currently 9-9 in the UFC, holds notable wins over Joe Ellenberger, Sage Northcutt, Warley Alves, Joe Proctor, Jake Ellenberger, Matt Brown, and Robbie Lawler. He is a brawler. He's tough as nails. We've seen him take a lot of punishment. He's also got a good team behind him at the MMA Lab. He's a guy that's always going to be coming forward, always in the fight, no matter how far behind he is. He can pull off some come behind wins. So, interesting pairing here. Mearshart's currently sitting as a minus 190 favorite, with Barberena as a plus 160 underdog. It's currently 1,691 Tapology votes on the fight. 83% of those are favoring Mearshart, with 78% of those taking him to win by submission. Of the 17% taking Barberena, 60% are taking him to win by knockout. Like I mentioned, both of these guys are journeymen. They're both highly unreliable. I would stay away from betting on this one. I don't like the odds anyway. Both have a history of pulling off comeback from behind wins. Both also have a history of just looking god-awful and getting crushed in fights. So I don't trust either one as far as I could throw them. Barberena actually has the better caliber wins, but he's the underdog here. So I don't like that either. Barberena is smaller. He's moved up to middleweight, and it hasn't really been a good look for him. I don't know why he's still there. So I do see Mearshart being able to get his grappling going in this fight, and I think he's going to have a large edge there. So, Barberena's a guy that likes to move forward. I think he'll move forward into some grappling exchanges, clinch exchanges, and I think that Mearshart will be able to lock something up. So for the official pick, give me Gerald GM3 Mearshart by submission in the second round. Up next on the card, we move to the worst division in the UFC, the women's bantamweight division, for a matchup between two top-ranked fighters in Pani Banzai Kianzad taking on Macy Chiasson. And this is a rematch as these two have fought once before. Kianzad is 32 years old. She is 16-7 overall with 3 knockouts and 13 decisions. She's a TUF 28 finalist. She's 5-4 in the UFC. She went 2-3 in Invicta. She holds notable wins over Lena Landsberg twice, Milana Dudieva, Jessica Rose Clark twice, Betch Correia, Sijara Eubanks, and Alexis Davis. On the other side, Chiasson is 32 years old. She's 8-3 overall with 2 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 4 decisions. She is the TUF 28 winner, defeated Kianzad by submission in the second round to win the Ultimate Fighter 28. She's currently 6-3 in the UFC, went 1-0 in Invicta. She holds notable wins over Larissa Pacheco on TUF, Leah Letson on TUF, Pani Kianzad, Marion Renault, and Norma Dumont. Chiasson is the minus 175 favorite here, with Kianzad coming back as a plus 145 underdog. It's currently 1,588 Tapology votes on the fight. 71% of those are favoring Chiasson. Of those, 88% are taking her to win by decision. Of the 29% taking Kianzad, 88% of those are expecting her to win by decision. This fight is most likely going to decision. I don't expect it to be entertaining either. So if you need to take a snack break, piss break, whatever you need, do it during this fight. Since beating Kianzad in the TUF 28 finals, Chason has had 7 UFC fights canceled. 3 of those were her fault. She has struggled to make weight in the bantamweight division. She's gone 5-3 since that win over Chason, and her level of competition has really just declined. She has picked up wins over Gina Mazzani, who's 2-6 in the UFC and was cut. Sarah Miraz, who's 3-6 in the UFC and was cut. Shanna Young, who's 1-3 in the UFC and was cut. Marion Renault, who lost 5 straight before retiring, and Chason was the 4th loss in those 5. So at the tail end of her career when she couldn't win fights anymore. And then she took a split decision win over Norma Dumont, which was decent. Norma Dumont's a pretty decent fighter, but she also missed weight at featherweight. So, I'm fed up with her. I've kind of written her off a little bit. Kianzad, since that loss to Chason, has gone 6-3. She won 1 fight outside of the UFC before coming back. She's defeated Jessica Rose Clark, who sucked. Betch Kohea, who was semi-decent. She's a former title challenger, at least. Sajara Eubanks, who sucked, had some decent wrestling, but never put it all together and also had issues making weight. And then Alexis Davis, who was decent and a former title challenger as well. And then also Lena Landsberg, who sucks, but was a top-ranked fighter for a while, so she can beat a lot of the other awful fighters in this division. So a win over her is, I guess, better than the wins that Chason's been picking up. Really, I think Kianzad has been more impressive since these two have fought. This is at bantamweight, not featherweight, so the weight cut for Chason may be an issue. I am liking Kianzad as the underdog here. I think I may have even favored her in the original pairing. She throws more volume. I think she can edge out the rounds just based on activity if she fights smart. I think she could take over the longer the fight goes, potentially press on that weight cutting issue and challenge the cardio Chason. Chason did look stronger. She was able to kind of bully Kianzad a little bit in the first fight, ended up submitting her. So if I'm wrong, wouldn't be shocked at all. But I do like Kianzad as an underdog here. Like I said, volume, striking is a path for her to win this fight. She's just going to need to work on her footwork, stay away from the power of Chason. But I think she can pull it off. So give me Pannie Kianzad by unanimous decision as the official pick. Next up on the main card, we have a light heavyweight pairing in a fight that really shouldn't be happening between Ovens OSP St. Preux taking on Kennedy African Savage and Zechukwu. OSP is 40 years old. He is 26-17 overall with 11 knockouts, 9 submissions, and 6 decisions. He is a former title challenger. He is 14-12 in the UFC. He went 6-1 in Strikeforce, and he holds notable wins in his career over Jean Vellante, Nikita Krylov, Ryan Jimmo, Mauricio Shogun Hua twice, Patrick Cummins, Rafael Cavalcante, Marcos Rogerio de Lima, Yushin Okami, Corey Anderson, Tyson Pedro, Michael Olajeszek, and Alonzo Menafield. On the other side, Kennedy is 31 years old. He is 12-4 overall with 8 knockouts, 1 submission, and 3 decisions. He's currently 6-4 in the UFC with notable wins over Carlos Ulberg, Carl Roberson, Jan Kutlaba, and Devin Clark. Kennedy is coming in here as a minus 500 favorite with OSP as a plus 380 underdog. It's currently 1,781 Tapology votes on the fight. 95% of those are favoring Kennedy and Zechukwu. 86% of those are taking him to win by knockout. Of the 5% taking OSP, 33% are taking him to win by knockout. I mean, OSP, he's a guy that's in his career, he's shown that he can be dangerous. He's got knockout power. He's got some crafty submissions. But, I mean, he looks done. At 40 years old, he doesn't look like he has anything left in the tank. He barely squeaked by Shogun for a split decision win. when Shogun was clearly a shell of his former self as well. And that was his only win in the last 3 years. He got knocked out early in his last fight by Felipe Lins, who just was able to tee off on him and KO him. So that's not a good sign going in here against a guy like Kennedy Nzechukwu. I do think Kennedy's a bit overrated himself. He's really only beaten bums. His best win was over Olberg, and that was almost a fluke win, you can call it. Still a solid win for him, but I mean, if you look at the rest of his opponents, most of them have been cut or have negative records in the UFC. So I still think even with him being overrated, OSP is just done. I don't think he has anything left. I think Kennedy Nzechukwu is going to run over him here. I expect to see another early knockout. So give me Kennedy Nzechukwu by knockout in the first round as the official pick. In the co-main event of the evening, you can really tell how terrible this card is because it is Brian Pooh Bear Battle taking on Inge, the last Ninja Lusa. Battle is 29 years old. He is 10-2 overall with 3 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 2 decisions. He is currently 5-1 in the UFC. He is the Ultimate Fighter 29 winner, and he has scored notable wins over Andre Petrosky on the Ultimate Fighter, Takashi Sato, Gabe Green, and AJ Fletcher. His only setback in the UFC has been against Renat Fakhretdinov, who is either top ranked or recently got removed from the top rankings, but he's a high-level guy. On the other side, Lusa is 29 years old as well. He is 10-3 overall with 5 knockouts, 1 submission, and 4 decisions. He is 2-1 in the UFC. His notable wins have come over John Howard before he got into the UFC, AJ Fletcher as well, and Reese McKee. His only loss in the UFC has come to Munir Lazzez. Battle is currently a -150 favorite with Lusa as a +125 underdog. It's currently 1,728 Tapology votes on this fight. 86% of those are favoring Battle, with 67% of those taking him to win a decision. Of the 14% taking Lusa, 64% of those are taking him to win a decision. I really don't think either fighter is that good here. I obviously think Brian Battle is better, and I think he has more potential overall. But I think both fighters really fail to stand out in any area, but they're just kind of decent everywhere. I do think Battle has the edge even in that, though, because he's the better grappler. Lusa may be the better striker, but he doesn't have enough power to stop Battle from doing what he wants to do in this fight. He's never shown that he can rock people in the UFC. He just kind of is there. Some of these other fighters kind of beat themselves against him. I feel like that's what happened with AJ Fletcher. Reese McKee is not that good, so just being there and being a step ahead of these guys, squeaking by with decisions. I don't think that's going to work against Brian Battle. I think Brian Battle is going to use the clinch. I think he'll wrestle him. I think he's going to outpace Lusa. Lusa's a guy, big muscular guy. I think he'll start to slow down as well. Maybe a late submission finish for Battle, but I'm just going to go with he wins the rounds. So give me for the official pick, Brian Battle by unanimous decision. It's time for the main event of the evening, the only exciting fight on this card, really a heavyweight pairing between Tai Bam Bam Tuivasa and Marcin Tybura. In the red corner, we have Tuivasa, who is 31 years old. He is 15-6 overall with 14 knockouts and 1 decision. He is currently 8-6 in the UFC. He's one of the most entertaining fighters on the entire roster, a very likable fighter, fan favorite. He has notable wins over Andrei Arlovsky, Stefan Struve, Greg Hardy, Augusto Sakai, and Derek Lewis. It will be his birthday on the fight day as well, so I expect him to come in here in top shape, looking to throw down. On the other side, Tybura is 38 years old. He is 24-8 overall with 8 knockouts, 7 submissions, and 9 decisions. He is the former M1 champ. He is 11-7 in the UFC with notable wins over Andrei Arlovsky, Stefan Struve, Sergey Spivak, Maxime Grishin, Ben Rothwell, Greg Hardy, Walt Harris, Alexander Romanov, and Blagoy Ivanov. Tuivasa is coming into this as a -130 favorite, with Tybura setting at a +110 underdog. It's currently 1,812 Tapology votes on the fight. 77% of those are favoring Tuivasa, with 92% of those taking him to win by knockout. Of the 23% taking Tybura, 44% of those are taking him to win by knockout. This is a close fight. I actually think Tybura is underrated. He's a guy that I liked before he came to the UFC, and I was glad to see him added to the roster. He's a really technical fighter. He's dangerous. He's got really good low kicks, which I think could be a big problem for Tuivasa if he's not able to close the distance. Tybura is good in the clinch as well. He's also got good submissions, so I think if he gets Tuivasa down, it's going to be a big problem for Tuivasa. But Tuivasa has one-shot knockout power, as we all know. I think he's going to pressure Tybura early on. He's super durable. He can take a shot. He will take a shot to land one of his own. We've seen these guys both kind of look really good at times and then look really awful at other times. So it wouldn't be shocking to see either guy score a ridiculously dominant win. I wouldn't be shocked if Tuivasa comes out and knocks him out early. And I wouldn't be shocked if Tybura just dominates him, hurts him bad with those leg kicks, punishes him, keeps him at range, takes him down, submits him, or even just keeps hitting him low and until Tuivasa can't stand anymore. So it's a bit of a toss-up. But I am favoring Tuivasa. I think that early pressure is not something that Tybura has shown that he can deal with very well. Tybura likes a cleaner fight. He likes to pick his shots. That's not something you're gonna be able to easily do against Tuivasa. He's looking to brawl. He's looking to draw you into a war. And I expect him to do that immediately. He's even said, he's not looking to waste any time in this fight. He's going to come out and start throwing immediately. So I do think he'll catch Tybura early and put him away. And we'll all be drinking some shoeies after the fight. So give me Tai Tuivasa to win by knockout in the first round as the official pick. And that's a wrap for this episode of the MMA Oracles Podcast. I've been your host, Jack Moon. As always, I appreciate you listening, and I would appreciate it even more if you could like, share, subscribe, and follow. You can find me at the MMA Oracles pretty much everywhere. I do apologize again for getting this out later in the week. I am working on getting these out a little bit earlier. Hopefully next one will be out early next week. So let's go over some of my locks for this card. I have Kennedy Nzechukwu. I don't see him losing to OSP. I don't think OSP has anything left. I think Kennedy Nzechukwu is going to just run him over, knock him out early. I like Mike Davis a lot in this one. He is coming off a long layoff, so that worries me a little bit, but I think he'll get it done. Josiane Nunes is pretty much a lock. I don't see Chelsea Chandler having much to offer. Like I said in my prediction, though, low-level fight there, so take that one with a bit of a grain of salt. Thiago Moises is a lock. There's no way Mitch Ramirez is beating him unless Moises is just completely fallen off. And he's the younger fighter, so it doesn't seem like he should. Josh Kulabau fighting a guy who is much less experienced. So I like Kulabau a lot. In that fight, the odds are pretty close. I see some people even taking Danny Silva, but I think Kulabau is the more experienced guy, going to teach him a lesson. And Charalampos Grigoriou, I like him as well as a lock. I really just don't see Chad and Hellinger being that good. I mean, the guy's like, 12-7 overall. I just don't see what he has to offer against Grigoriou. I mean, training with the team that Grigoriou has, he's going to be well prepared for the grappling, and he's obviously the better striker. So, those are my locks. Parlay pick, I'm still working on. Graphic should be up on the screen of what it will be. Likely be a combination of some of those locks there. Odds are pretty close, even for some of these fights that I've said that are locks. So I'm going to play around with that a bit. Graphic will be up there for what my official parlay pick will be. Underdogs for this card, I like Corey McKenna. She's almost near even, but majority of people are picking her. I think she's going to pull off that slight upset. Pandy Kanzad, I like her as well. Macy Chachelon's going to be cutting a lot of weight. I think the volume can win out there for Pandy Kanzad. And Christian Rodriguez. I mean, this guy's been the underdog in his fights against undefeated prospects before, and he's come through every time. So I'm going to roll the dice on him as well. Some good fights on this card. There's really not many. Josh Kulabov versus Danny Silva is a decent fight. Mike Davis versus Nathan Levy is a decent fight. And Christian Rodriguez versus Isaac Dolgarian is a decent fight. And then the main event, obviously. Rest of the card, it's a pretty low level, not good card. If you miss it, I honestly might miss it and just kind of check out the highlights afterwards and go over it. So, yeah, those are my plays for this week, my picks. I appreciate you listening. As always, please like, share, subscribe, and follow. I am signing out.